this idea from Dan Bloom. It allows us to adjust to each other well when they come. So when you see each other, it allows you to feel the field, to get the feeling of the field in this situation and see how many of us are present. So let's turn it on for a while. I'm glad to see familiar faces and also new people.
Привіт всім.
Hi, everybody.
Привіт.
Hello.
І не будемо надовго відкладати.
So we won't postpone it for a long time. It's the second lecture by Philip Brownell that will be dedicated to the design of research. The first lecture we have recorded. We will also record this lecture, and later it will be available on our YouTube channel. I want to thank Philip for agreeing to make this cycle of lectures because it's very interesting.
Скажу, що ця лекція проходить за підтримки Гештальт-дослідницької
This lecture is supported by Gestalt Research Association. Philip supports our association by those events. And if you are interested to join the association or to know more about us, please follow the links. Natalia will put them into chat.
І я попрошу вимкнути звук.
So I ask you to turn the sound off, everybody who doesn't ask questions or doesn't talk, we could work without disturbance. And I will remind you that we work in two languages, in English and Ukrainian, and you can choose two channels for translation. There's English channel and Ukrainian channel. If you want to hear it in Ukrainian, you can click Ukrainian. If in English, English.
На цьому все. Філіп,
Будь
ласка, передаю тобі слово.
I stop and I pass the floor to Philip.
You just turned it over to me?
Так.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, for being here. And I thank Alexei for the opportunity to talk about research with people I care about. I just looked out the window where I'm sitting. Our house is kind of dug into the ground. And so the window is right at ground level. And one of our dogs sits outside that window when I'm working here. And I sometimes feel like she's like judging what I'm saying, but I don't know. Probably doesn't even get it. So today, following on the last meeting in which we looked at various kinds of research literature, we actually looked at different articles and talked about what was going on and how to read a research article and what to expect in them. This time, we're going to talk about something called research design. So sometimes a couple of terms get mixed up. One of them is design and the other one is method. So this is a way to help you think about this and distinguish between the two terms because they're kind of important. Obviously, as you know, there's a war going on in your country. And in our country, we have people probably all over the world. There are people who are trying to analyze what's happening in that war. Who's ahead? Where are the lines? Who's doing what with drones? Things like that. And people are on there talking constantly about the war, and they use this term strategy. And sometimes they'll distinguish strategy from tactics. So I think that's a useful distinction when we're thinking about a kind of a war that Gestalt people are engaged in too. We're in a war to save Gestalt therapy. That's been one way of thinking about why we do research. I think there's a lot more to it than that, but that's certainly one thing that Gestalt people think. We need to have research. We need to have a research support, an evidence base in order for people outside of Gestalt to consider us a viable approach to psychotherapy, to treatment. So what's the difference between strategy and tactics? Strategy is the big picture. Strategy is the overall goal of what you're trying to get done, and the big picture way of accomplishing it. And tactics are the individual, very different kinds of methods that people use to win a battle, to contribute to the overall strategy. So we have strategic designs, and we have methodological tactics to accomplish the strategies. Today we're going to talk about research design as strategy. And so I'm making this distinction also because when we did the reading of research literature, there was a section, there always is a section in a research article called methods or methodology. That's not strategy. Strategy comes across in the overall article, but methods are the individual little things that you do to achieve the strategy, the overall purpose. So they would be things like what kinds of statistical
Перчатки резиновые, но такие одноразовые, чтобы выкинуть потом. Будь ласка, вимкніть звук, Наталія. Одну хвилинку. Наталія Мемедова. Треба вимкнути звук, я так розумію.
There is some intrusion of sound. Yes, please. Can you repeat the last phrase because there was an interruption? Yeah.
I hear you.
You hear me. Alexei, do you hear me?
Yeah, it's okay. You can go on.
All right. So anyway, those are the two distinctions. So today we're going to talk about research design. So this is what I said here. Let's arrange this a little bit better. So this is what I said here. In war, there's a strategy and there are tactics. In the War to Save Gestalt, we're interested in this strategy. That's what I'm going to be talking about today. And research design pertains to the strategy, and the methods relates to the tactics. So when you see methods in a research paper, they're probably talking more about specific tactics, not the overall strategy. But if you pull back from the whole paper, you'll see the strategy that they're involved with. And you'll hopefully understand when we get into some of these particular designs. So in research, the strategy, the big global strategy, would be to embrace multiple methods while maintaining the philosophical perspective that lets us critically evaluate the results and apply them in practice. We want to be open to adjusting our theory if good research indicates that we should, and know what makes for good research. So why do I say that? It's because especially early on when we started understanding that Gestalt therapists needed to do research. We couldn't wait for professors somewhere in some university because we didn't really have them. So Gestalt therapists would have to do research. And then it seemed like the whole purpose was to validate something that we already believed worked. In other words, just kind of rubber stamp it, send it on its way, proved. But that's a one-way thinking, one-way street kind of thinking. That's not allowing the research to affect what we do. So it has to be a two-way kind of street. If we are engaged in research and we are choosing a particular design, we have a purpose in mind, but the research might talk back to us. The results, what happens when we do the research might talk back to us, and we have to allow that, what it says to us, to affect what we do as Gestalt therapists. That's an ethical way of handling research. Okay, and so the last thing is to apply a scientific method with an informed understanding of really what that entails. So, people need science to keep the philosophers' feet on the ground, and people need philosophy to help number crunchers get to the significance of their equations. Why put that in there? Because it seemed to me at some point along the way that we as Gestalt therapists were embracing philosophy as a kind of proof, a validation of what we were doing. That when we talked about the philosophy that supported our theory, which would be like phenomenology or field concepts. There are various kinds of field concepts, or dialogue, back and forth, relational kinds of things, emergent philosophy, these kinds of things. They're all philosophy. They're all ways of thinking about the theory. Do they prove anything? I mean, do they really validate anything about the way that we work to the rest of the world? I would say only if the people you're talking to are already philosophers. They're already equipped with a kind of philosophical way of looking at things. Then the philosophy kind of has some oomph to it, some validity. But otherwise, not philosophy by itself. So we needed something else. We needed science, because science grounds the abstract in the concrete, in things that are actually happening on the ground. But without philosophy, without a critical way of thinking about the results of the statistical results, then we don't really get the implications of the results. We don't understand what, and we'll talk about this in another time, concepts like validity and significance, things like that. We don't, just because you have statistical significance doesn't mean that you have something that matters. And the philosophy, the critical thinking helps show the meaning or the significance in real life of the statistical results. Any questions about what I've said so far? Yeah.
Чи правильно я тоді розумію, що
Then do I
одні й ті самі
understand
дані
right that
можуть
the same
виглядати по-різному
data
в залежності
can
від
look
різних
differently
філософських
depending on
концепцій
different
щодо
philosophical
мислення,
concepts
обґрунтовування, сприйняття
that
світу?
you apply to your way of thinking, to your
I didn't get a
mindset?
translation of that.
Can you hear me?
Маша, ти могла перекласти?
Я
Я можу повторити питання.
Phil, can you
Давай
hear
ще раз
me?
повтори питання.
Phil, can you hear me?
I don't know what you said, Alexei. I'm not getting a translation of that.
Мгм. Мгм. Phil, can you switch yourself to the English channel because you can't hear translator? Yeah. In the bottom of the screen there is a. Do you hear me? Yeah. There is a different. There is a button called interpretation. You need to click there and choose English channel, and then if someone speak Ukrainian, you will hear translation.
Hold on. You're talking to me.
So, can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm talking to you.
Philip, can you hear me?
Okay.
In the bottom of the screen, there is different buttons.
Interpretation?
Yeah, right. And English, choose English channel.
Okay. I got it.
So, does it work?
I hear you now, yes.
Here, super.
Чудово. Тоді я повторю питання, добре? Чи означає
Does it
це
mean
те, що якщо ми
then
маємо
that
одні й ті
if we
самі
have the
дані з
same
дослідження, в
data, like
залежності від
empirical data from the
різних
research,
філософських
so
концепцій,
depending on
шкіл,
different philosophical
бачення
concepts,
світу, ми
like
будемо
perspective
інтерпретувати ці
that's
дані
behind,
по-різному, і це буде
we can
означати
interpret
різні
this
речі.
data in different way, and that might have different meaning, right?
Kind of. The data is going to come back, and it's hard. The data itself is not going to change, but the way what we bring to the reading of the data, the perspective, our own needs, the things we're trying to accomplish, our own personal lives. Gee, okay, so the data says something, and how does that relate to my own personal life? Those are going to affect the way that we understand and interpret the data. But within limits, right? I mean, if the data says that the apple falls down, if you're laying on the ground, it's it starts up. So where does it become down? I don't know. But, so it's like, but the apple still falls down. Let's see, where am I? Okay. Any other question? Okay. Scientific method. So now I'm using a particular term, scientific method. That's not the same thing as I was saying strategy, design and method. So scientific method is just this larger concept. It's a term. And I'm I'm going to put out a definition of the scientific method here, which relates kind of to what we're just talking about. And it's from an article by Machado in the American Psychologist back in 2007. So it's got like 3 parts to it. First part is systematic observation. There's observation. I noticed that, you're on the fly and you notice something. Like I noticed that I've got a slightly different perspective of Alexei's cat today than I think I had the last time. Because the camera might be different or something like that. Okay. So, well, that's just something that I notice. And we notice constantly, like when we're working clinically, we notice things. We, in fact, a large part of what we're doing is trying to bring to our awareness to notice, to pay attention to various aspects of what's going on in the current moment with the client, with the therapist, self and other, the we, all of those things. So that's a little bit different from systematic observation. Systematic observation is where you set it up ahead of time to deliberately place the camera here as opposed to there, to have maybe 2 or 3 cameras instead of just one. And you have the audio in a certain way, and you employ some AI to keep track of the audio and to be able to analyze it and look for certain key terms and things like that. So it's systematic. It's disciplined empirical attention to what is actually happening. Second thing is that there's the second part of a scientific method would be mathematical analysis. This is quantifying the things that are observed. Quantifying that lets us compare, model, and detect patterns. A lot of people, I don't know how many people, some people say the mathematizing of our process destroys the process. Maybe. I mean, if that's all you're doing is you're really interested in the statistical outcome, so you can do a statistical analysis, and you're just being the number cruncher, then I would say maybe that's a wrong attitude. But in the scientific method, in order for us to conduct science, according to Machado, you need to have this ability to analyze mathematically what's observed. Then there's the critical thinking. So let me come back to the mathematical thing. So the statistical analysis will show if some kind of change has happened at a level to have statistical significance. Like it just didn't happen by random. It just didn't somehow by luck come to pass. No, that there's something going on in the process that you're observing that was not just luck or fate or something like that. It was just like, no, there was something going on here. It is statistically significant. So then critical thinking, this is the reflection on what the numbers mean, where science and philosophy meet in a coherent approach to something called warrant. So this webinar that
Sorry,
I'm
could you
doing
repeat
here,
the last phrase, please?
yes. Critical thinking is the reflection on what the numbers mean, where science and philosophy meet in a coherent approach to warrant. And warrant is a particular significant term. This webinar is actually part of a larger one that I've done in the past talking about warrant. So what is warrant? Warrant. Warrant, WARRANT, warrant is, it means justification. Is something justified? In other words, so I'm a Christian. I believe that Jesus was the Messiah of Israel. What is that, just like out of nowhere? Do I have a reason for believing that? Yeah, I have a reason. I won't go into the whole thing, but the question of warrant is, do I have a justified reason? Are my reasons warranted? Are my conclusions warranted? That's what I mean. So, some people might say, well, let's see. Here's one. Just recently, got into a conversation with Peter Phillipson about the similarity between ACT, which is acceptance and commitment therapy, and Gestalt therapy. Why I would bring this up is not to the point. The thing is, I had reasons for believing that there were similarities, and I pointed out particular ones. Now, were my observations warranted? In other words, when I saw people in a training group for ACT paying attention to the phenomenological experience of the between client and therapist in a current moment. And I thought to myself, oh gosh, that looks just like Gestalt therapy. Was that observation warranted, justified? Okay, so that's what is behind all of this stuff about outcomes research. When people say CBT is an effective psychotherapy, is that statement warranted? Is it justified? Well, how do you justify it? People justify it on the systematic observation, the mathematical analysis, and now that comes to the critical thinking. Is it warranted? Is it justified? Is it significant in the broader real world way of talking about things? Does this make sense? Does anybody have any question about these things? Okay. So now we're going to move into looking at some particular designs, but we need to think, remember strategy. There's a war going on. What are we trying to accomplish? Well, maybe not everybody is really interested as much in winning the war as in doing research that says something else, that finds out something else. That's not about outcomes and about whether Gestalt therapy is effective and significant and all that kind of a thing. And maybe they're interested in something else. So their strategy would be slightly different. Depends on what a person is interested in, what they're curious about, that kind of a thing. So design follows from research questions. That's the starting point. So when people say we could do this, we could do that kind of research, if they're not thinking about what they're trying to accomplish, what's the strategy related to, it's kind of like the cart before the horse, because the real critical element here is the question, or put it another way, as I have here, the curiosity, the need, or the purpose. There might be another criteria that you can think of, but when I do a Gestalt experiment, for instance, it's like a real small kind of piece of research, because the question is for me, I wonder what would happen if I did this, or what happens when I do this. And that's one of the criteria for doing an experiment, a behavioral experiment, is to classically in CBT, it is to dis reject a false hypothesis. Oh, I thought this, but oh, we did this experiment and it showed, oh, no, my theory was wrong. Okay, fine. The other main reason to do an experiment is to just get new information. I wonder what would happen. So that's curiosity, and people have all kinds of curiosities. Just imagine how much research could just come out of curiosity all by itself. One of the classic research projects in communication was done because the researcher was wondered if males and females had a different kind of way of communicating. And so I may have mentioned this because I usually go to it. What she did is she took a lot of little boys and put them in a room, and took a lot of little girls and put them in another room, and just watched what they did. Curiosity. I wonder what would happen. So that's what she did. She found that the little boys sit side by side and work on a project. The little girls sit across from each other and speak directly to each other, looking at each other in the face about what's going on between them or what's important to them. That's a generality, but that was what she noticed. So she evaluated that statistically and then started thinking about it and applying it and so forth. So curiosity. Another one is need. And this is the one that we usually go to when Gestalt therapists start talking about research. What do we need? We need research. Why do we need research? Because if we don't have research, we're going to be left behind, and Gestalt therapy will not be, the government won't pay for it, the insurance company won't pay for it, et cetera, et cetera. I can't get my license if I'm a Gestalt therapist, on and on. We need research. Okay. Another one would be purpose. What am I trying to do? Like some people, their job is research. That's what they are. They're researchers. And these people largely you'll find them at universities, right? And so what do? They conduct research. First of all, they have to get a grant for doing the research, and that pays for their job at the university. And so they're kind of like, the purpose is to make a living, but it's to do interesting work too. So their purpose is wrapped up in their vocation and who they are and what they're doing and what kind of a person they are. So all of these things can be personal and they can be institutional. So I'm curious about your curiosity, about your potential needs, about your purposes, or other kinds of things. What brings you to the issue of doing or learning about research? I don't know. Do you even conceive of yourself as doing research? I'd like to hear some. So people raise your hands or somehow get into this and start sharing. Do you have a curiosity? Do you have a need that brings you to research? What is your purpose? This is where you talk.
Давай, давайте я тоді скажу, що моя, наприклад, Мабуть,
So I will
вона
say that
мета і мрія
my
це
main
сприяння
purpose and
збільшенню,
dream
там,
is
укріпленню доказової
to
бази
create favorable
гештальт-терапії.
conditions
І
for
навіть не для
developing some
страховки, бо в Україні там
evidence-based
немає з цим
basics for
проблем.
Gestalt therapy, not
А для
even for
того, щоб
insurance, because we
цей
don't have
психотерапевтичний
a
метод
serious
пацієнтів
problem with that,
сприймався
but
на
for
рівні з
this
іншими, а не
psychotherapeutic
як якийсь
method could be
додатковий, не дуже
regarded
відомий
not as some
або
additional,
не
not very
зрозумілий
known
якийсь
methods, but as equal to some most known ones, respected ones.
Okay.
Я боєць в тій війні, яку ти розказав про гештальт.
So I'm a warrior in this war that you were talking about, like that in Gestalt, about Gestalt.
Yeah. So that's a need. Yeah. You're a soldier in the army, particular kind of army. Anybody else?
Я можу сказати ще.
I can say
Мені схоже АСТ Моцлі, ну, з клініки Моцлі, і програма Отто Кернберга про розвиток особистості, там, де вони
what's similar for me, it's
вчаться цій
IST,
програмі.
Maudsley and Otto Kernberg, where they learn their programs and they say about here and now, and they say that we also follow those principles, but they have those articles, and they have very similar articles. So at Kernberg, they more say about tactics and strategy, but maybe we don't formulate it like that. It's not so structured, but we also have it. And I saw this correspondence, and I also vote for Gestalt, for we could do it better because we don't describe it while having that as well.
Do you have a curiosity?
Є.
Yeah.
Yeah,
like,
I do.
Okay. I have a curiosity about what would happen. What happens? What happens? What is it that takes place when the light of interest goes on for someone about research? And I saw it happen at the first research conference that took place out at where was it? At GI, what is it? The Gestalt International Study Center at Cape Cod. And we had people from the Association for Advancement of Gestalt Therapy, as it was called then, who were like leaders of that organization. They were holding their annual leaders meeting and somewhere in proximity, and they attended. And they listened to the people who brought their research projects and interests to present. And they were fascinated by what research, how it opened up a new way of thinking and practicing for them. And I saw that light go on. So I'm curious about what it is, what makes the difference between a person who I don't want to be bothered by research, that's for somebody else, and somebody who all of a sudden goes, oh, gosh, that's really interesting. That's one curiosity I have. Anybody else?
Так, я б хотіла теж сказати,
Yeah, I would like to say
мене цікавить
I'm curious about
взагалі в психології,
research in
в різних галузях
psychology,
психології.
in different areas of psychology,
я
and
десь
in particular
2017 року
from
працюю над темою
2017, I work on topic of
От,
intersubjectivity.
вся проникнута
It's
гештальтом, і
very
також я
much
пишаюся тим, що весни минулого року
combined with
Олексієм
Gestalt,
Виноградовим теж,
and I'm proud that
а також з
then
Анастасією
since
Гармат та
this
Анастасією
year we
Сальниковою
also
почали
engage
проводити
Alexei Vinogradov
дослідження
and
навчання,
Anastasia
особливо це
Salnikova, and we
навчання
started
гештальтерапевтів
to run
Це
a
дуже
research
мене
of teaching
захоплює,
Gestalt
я
or training
цікавлюся
Gestalt
цим.
therapists in Ukraine and in the whole
Мені
world.
подобається
So I'm very
писати про
curious
це.
about that. I like
Я
writing
розумію
about
також
that.
цю
And I
необхідність
also understand this
гештальт-дослідження.
necessity of
Мені б теж
Gestalt
хотілося, щоб
researches,
гештальт був
and I would love
таким надійним,
Gestalt to be
перевіреним,
such a
доказовим методом,
reliable
визнаним,
and
ефективним.
evidence-based and acknowledged method.
Ну і, власне,
So
на рівні мети теж у мене є таке
on the level of
бачення
purpose,
того, що
I
мені
have
хотілося б
the
досліджувати
vision that
діалогічні
I would like to
аспекти життя
research
людини, а також
dialogical aspects
з'ясовувати,
of
звідки
human
людина
life,
бере
and
свої
also find
джерела
out
натхнення.
where do people find
Я,
the sources
власне,
of their
я
inspiration
поєдную в
from.
своїй роботі і
And I
діяльність викладача
combine in my
психології,
work
і
both the
дослідника із
activity of
психології в гештальті, і
the teacher of Gestalt
гештальт-терапевта. Ну, таке
psychology,
останнє
and
поняття
also
тільки починаю, але це для мене важливо.
I'm as a researcher and also as a Gestalt therapist here. Thank you.
That was great. Thank you. So that's like curiosity. And also about that light that I was talking about. Because let's see, how can I put this? When I read philosophy or I talk with somebody and we're talking about philosophy, I don't know if you've noticed this, but for me, there's always this reference to Husserl said, or Heidegger said, or as somebody else said, or even like our esteemed trainers in Gestalt therapy, our trainer said, it's what somebody else said about the way things are. In research, what you do is you say, well, I hear what they said. Now I want to find out what happens. I want to experience. Research is a kind of experience. I want to experience what happens in a way in which I can talk about it with some validity or some clarity, because I've seen it, I've heard it, I've experienced it. And that's what happens when you have a curiosity, especially, and then you put together a project, you run your project, and you get the results. You analyze them statistically so you can say, well, did it happen by chance, or did it happen because of something that took place, something we did? And when you get that, then you like say to yourself, I just discovered something. I discovered something for myself. And I had an experience of that. I don't know if that communicates to you, but for me, it's a little bit different than so-and-so said. Okay, anybody else? A curiosity, a need, a purpose, or some other reason, whatever that
Yes,
you might have.
I have a question. Do you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
I'm Gerardo from Italy, and I would
Yes.
like to thank to you, Philip, and everyone. I would like to talk about EMDR. Yes, and recently I read research, some documents about warrants of EMDR. In Italy, many psychotherapists from different perspective, Gestalt, systemic CBT, also some psychoanalysts are using this method, EMDR, to manage traumatic question, but also for depression and many stuff. What I read in this document from APA, American Psychological Association, in this document there is a new research that gathered many other research about EMDR, and they declassified EMDR because it is not clear what happens when you move the high left, right, left continuously. And the statement is different currently, and many researchers said that the reason, the validity of the EMDR is a kind of deflection in Gestalt term. When you move the finger near the person pay attention to the finger and to the trauma memories. So it is more easy to manage the emotion, everything about that. This is, in my words, sorry for my bad English.
No, it's fine.
Yeah, and I would like, I'm saying this because I think this is the case that curiosity, need, and purpose goal is necessary to create more knowledge about EMDR. Curiosity because I want to know how this method works in the people. Need because I need, because I am a psychologist, I need to use a good method to help my clients. I want to be sure that this method works with my client. And yes, the purpose and goal is almost the same, is to offer to my client the perspective to heal. And I think EMDR, that it is a very large method, many therapists are using this method, needs this kind of research to reach a more awareness about the validity. This is what I want to say, to share.
Gerardo, thank you. I appreciate that. It's a good example. What is it about? So let's see. You can do a study that says we start here with the patient having these symptoms. Now we do the therapy, and then we take another measurement over here at the end to compare the end with the beginning and say, oh, well, the patient doesn't have the symptoms now. Oh, what happened? Something happened between the starting place and the end place. Because when we test it mathematically, statistically, there's a difference that didn't happen by chance, we don't think. So a lot more needs to go into it than what I'm saying, but the question is, what happened? Right? And I think what you're asking is, at least what I got from what you said, is there's a curiosity about what causes the difference. It's not just that there is a difference, but what caused the difference? And what is the difference? Where is the difference located with the EMDR? How does that happen? When they go like this, or they blink, or they do something else, What's happening? Is it just a distraction? We were talking about something and now you forgot about it. And so it's a sort of a cognitive thing, or is it a neurological thing? That's what a lot of people say, that something about the blinking, the lights going on and off. You can stimulate someone to have a seizure with that kind of a thing, intense lights going on and off. So, gosh, maybe it has something to do with the neurology of the brain. So now you're into the area of neuropsychology. So is there a neuropsychological reason for the difference? What causes it? And so the study then would involve probably, now this is the tactics, the method of the study would be attaching receptors or something to the skull and doing imaging and doing all those kinds of things to also track the difference. Where's this activity happening in the brain and what's happening with that area? What does that part of the brain do? That kind of a thing. So those are all the methods in which a person might um, do the study. What is the strategy? Why are they doing that? Because what you said, I want to find out what causes this difference so that I can employ that in my work. That is a different kind of purpose and strategy than someone who says, I want to be able to do Gestalt therapy without the government taking it away from me. See the difference? One is there's just something in me I want, has to do with me, my identity, what my fascination with doing therapy. I want to do good therapy. I want to understand what causes things and how to use that in my therapy. The other one is I need to get Gestalt therapy approved by the government and the insurance company and so on. Like it's a different kind of purpose, different kind of need, involved curiosity too. I think in what you said, yes, curiosity, need, purpose, they're all kind of at times wrapped up in each other, but they're involved. And those are the things that are related to the strategy, our strategy. What is the strategy for doing any particular kind of research? In fact, the kinds of designs that we choose they are strategic decisions that can be personal and institutional. So here are several designs. Design follows from research questions. The use of design presupposes a clarity about what we're asking and or about what our curiosity or purpose is. So here, let's look at some of these. So here's one called Clinical Observation and Case Study. A long time ago, it used to be, I don't see too many of these anymore, but maybe they're still in the writing, where someone would present a case. A Gestalt therapist would present a case. They would write up a case. And basically what they would do is they would say, no, I met with this man and he's the particular age and he wanted to talk. His need was X, Y, and Z. And so we met and I did Gestalt therapy. I did Gestalt therapy this way. And it seemed to work because the man seemed to be alleviated of his angst, his anxiety, his depression, whatever it was. And so I think it worked. In fact, when we started talking about the need to do Gestalt therapy, a lot of people would say, I'm not a researcher, I'm a therapist. And I know Gestalt therapy works because I've seen it work with my clients. My clients got better. So Clinical observation and case study is at one level just anecdotal testimony. That is just like, let me tell you a story about what happened when I met with my client. So it's a subjective appraisal. And the question to evaluate this was the therapist and were the therapist and client satisfied with the process? So at one level, people can get together and just talk about the way they work, or you can watch somebody work. Like I said, I was in an ACT training group and watched the way they work, and I came to the conclusion, oh gosh, this is just like Gestalt therapy. Well, aside from the issue of warrant, that was my anecdotal, that is my first person, I went through this, let me tell you the story, testimony. That's it. That's all case study is at one kind of case study. Now you can be more organized in the way that more systematic in the way that you observe, so that you set out some rules ahead of time to track the process. But it's still going to be, let me tell you the story about what happened when I met with my client. And so other people could say, well, yeah, but what about this? What about that? They can bring all kinds of objections to the story or the conclusions about the story and say there's other things involved. We can't rely on that. And basically, that's what the evidence-based movement would say. We can't really rely on the stories that therapists tell about the validity of their process with their clients. Alexa, you have your hand up.
Так, в мене питання,
Yes,
ти
I
сказав,
have a
що
question.
терапевт
You
описує
said
кейс
that the
стадії і каже,
therapist
здається, воно
describes
працювало,
and
воно так виглядає,
says
але ж
in,
він
in
може...
case study it
Hold
looks like it worked.
Hold on. Alexei was talking, and I don't know who it was that was talking. Somebody else was started talking too. Okay, so let's take Alexei first. Or was it yeah, no. I'm confused. Maybe it was the translator talking. Go ahead.
Yes, I was a translator. I was talking actually. Yeah, I was translating for you. Yeah.
Да.
All right.
Да.
Continue. Sorry.
Продовжуй, будь ласка.
Добре. Ну, тобто, ти сказав, що цей
So you said
терапевт описав
that
свій
this
випадок і
therapist
каже, ну, схоже, що воно
described
працює,
his
але його
case
слово
and
схоже.
said looks
Адже він
like
може
it
поміряти
works. He
його
says
дані
looks
до і
like,
після,
but
і
so
хоча
he
це
can
одинокий
measure
випадок, він
the
може
data of a
стверджувати це на основі
client before and
вимірюваної
after.
ситуації, а
But
не на основі просто
though
того,
it's
що йому так
one
візуально
single
здається.
case, but still he can rely on some quantitative data, but not only on his like subjective impression.
If you have what's called systematic case studies, then you're setting it up ahead of time rather than trying to catch up to it after you've met with the client. So you set it up ahead of time, the structure of what you're going to be looking for when you conduct the case. And as you conduct the case, you're watching for certain things. And so you might go check, check, check every time you hear it to make things simple. And so afterwards, then you can quantify, we heard the client say or refer to this particular problem 100 times. That's data. If you don't do that and you just go through the meeting with the client and then after the fact try and make sense out of it, then what you're doing is you're telling the best story you can from what you know from your life and your experience as a therapist which is valuable, but in terms of empiricism or empirical studies or evidence-based movement, it's really a low level of warrant. So warrant is the conclusion justified? So the therapist could say, I met with so-and-so and we worked this way, and it seems to me that he got better, certainly was satisfied. And so, okay, that's at a level of warrant, but it's low level warrant in terms of the evidence-based movement. Does that make sense? Yeah. But if you do systematic case study, now you've said, you've already determined you've structured it in a way, which a lot of people won't like. They say, oh, your structure is interfering with the process, the intersubjective dialogue. You're tainting it. You're messing with it. So they don't like that. But well, okay. But in terms of the curiosity, need, and purpose of research, structured clinical observation, structured systematic case study is worth more, higher level of warrant than just talking about it after you've done it.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, we're gonna have to click along here. So here's another one, which is, so case study is usually Gestalt user-friendly, has been in the past. Structured or systematic case study, a little bit better. This one, qualitative and phenomenological design, is usually much more acceptable to Gestalt people. Why? Because it's noticing things. It's really related to awareness, which we already do when we talk about a phenomenological method to doing therapy. What are we doing? We're paying attention. Before the relational movement made a big deal about the we, that is what's going on between the client and the therapist, is both connected. You can't separate one from the other. Then people would focus more on the client, this and that. They would observe things about the client. And it's the texture, it's the color, it's the raw material for theory building. And it's very useful, especially for that. Questions would be, what was happening or what is happening? What sense do people have or make of it? What are the aesthetics of the back and forth of the meeting? Does this set of data suggest a relationship between factors in the study? So it's got a very definite utility. Does it provide evidence of the effectiveness of the approach? Not very much. The only way you're going to establish effectiveness or efficacy, another term we'll get to in a minute, is by another design, another strategy. Okay, but that's what this is. Then we have this one, process outcomes studies. This is very interesting. So it used to be that when people were wanting, and I say people in general now, not just Gestalt people, but people psychotherapists in general, psychologists who study psychotherapy, at one point wanted to know if, gosh, is psychotherapy even worth doing? Does it work? So they did studies and they found that yes, psychotherapy does work. There's a before and after effect. We seem to see a benefit to doing psychotherapy. So now, then we have the psychotherapy wars where, well, is this version of psychotherapy better than this version of psychotherapy? Which one works better? So it's all outcomes type of research. What's the outcome that shows if the particular type of psychotherapy works? That's called outcomes research. And all that people were interested in is the final little conclusion. It works, or it works better than CBT, or it works as good as CBT, or it has longer term effects than CBT. That's all outcomes research. And that's taking the whole process, like if we took everything about Gestalt therapy and bundled it up in a sack, that's the whole thing, it works. What process outcome studies do is they look at the mechanisms of change. What aspects of the process were most powerful in producing the change? So this is not just got the whole bundle, it works. This is like, oh, wait a minute. Yeah, it works. We got that read now. Let's do something to find out which one of these pieces in this bundle are more effective than others. Is it the relationship? Is it the phenomenological tracking? In terms of our Gestalt theory, is it something about the field? So like a systems kind of approach? What is it that's most effective about doing Gestalt therapy? That's process outcome studies. Any questions? Okay. So remember, these are all strategies. Why would you pick one over another? Has to do with your curiosity. Has to do with what you're interested in. Single case, let's go to this one first. Effectiveness studies. Real world data, external validity. Was Gestalt therapy as effective as CBT for depressed clients? Okay, now we're getting a little more specific, right? We didn't get into the specifics of outcome, process outcome, but here effectiveness studies are, when we did this, then we noticed that. When we applied Gestalt therapy, we noticed the patient was happy. I'm being ridiculous here, but anyway, you get it. When we did CBT, we noticed the patient was happy. Oh, when we did Gestalt therapy, did we notice that the patient was as happy as Gestalt as CBT? Well, I don't know, maybe. Got maybe a bigger effect size. At least we can say as happy. And that was the kind of study that was done in Great Britain some time ago, where the Gestalt people took part in a larger study of the mental health system in England, looked at the process or the outcomes of all kinds of therapists and compared the outcomes of Gestalt therapy with CBT, and other kind of comparisons were done. And what they found was that Gestalt therapy in this study compared to the outcomes of CBT. Which is that's like, was it effective? That's what an effectiveness study is. But what it is, it's a correlation. It just says, when we do this, that seems to happen. And so it can be a positive correlation. When we do this, the patient gets better. Or a negative correlation. When we do this, the patient gets worse. So then you have different methods like, okay, so we're going to do this and we notice the patient gets better. What happens if we stop doing any kind of therapy at all? So when we do that, the patient gets worse. Positive correlation, negative correlation. It's just a correlation. Correlational studies, effectiveness studies like that, don't show that the Gestalt or whatever it is caused it. You can't say from a correlational study that there was causation. Gestalt therapy caused the change. You can't say that from an effectiveness study. It's just like when we do this, that seems to happen. Why? Well, we don't know for sure. We'll have to do a process outcomes study to figure that one out, or a different kind of study, a different kinds of strategy. So now we're going to move into the causation strategy. And this one here, randomized controlled trials, RCT, a lot of people call that the gold standard of outcomes research. Why? Because, let's see. What did I have to move this over? Yeah. There's a internal validity through the comparison with a control group. So the design itself, inside the design, provides something that gives a comparison with a group that didn't have the treatment. So the effectiveness study compares treatment of one kind, treatment of another kind, treatment, yes, stop, go, that kind of a thing. This one says, here's the control, here's the treatment group, here's a group that doesn't have anything. Now we're going to compare the treatment to nothing, to people who don't have anything, and see if there's a statistical difference. And it will be even better if we don't have anything really, any investment in the kind of people we choose. So random choice of subjects. So random controlled, the control group trials or research. It's called an efficacy study because you measure the difference between treatment and no treatment over time. Then you can say, yeah, the group.
What do you say? I'm sorry. Did you say which term did you use? Did you use the efficacy?
Oh yes, this is called an efficacy.
Efficacy.
Yes, efficacy is it shows that there is causation. What you do is efficacious. It is not just effective in the sense of correlation, but actually caused it. And that's why efficacy studies are regarded as a higher, actually the best evidence when you're thinking evidence-based practice, evidence-based research, evidence-based movement. Efficacy studies caused, effectiveness studies, correlation. Correlation is great, but you can't say that what you did caused the effect. Efficacy studies, what you did caused the effect. So random controlled trials, was Gestalt the cause of change across an experimental group. It's a group study. They're hard to do. Where are you going to get a group of people together sufficient, not just one group, but two groups, sufficient to conduct this study? It costs usually money and time and involves a high degree of energy in organizing and tracking the whole thing. It's harder to do. That's why they're done largely at the university level by professors who have a ready-made pool of subjects in their students, in grad students or undergrad students. They're there. You can take advantage of them. You can use them. Anyway, another kind of efficacy study is a single case experimental design. And by the way, when you hear the term experimental design, what they're talking about is an efficacy study, pretty much. It's like you have to have random choice of subjects. You have to have so many subjects, X number of subjects, at least 30, like in groups. If you're going to have group study, you have to have 30 in your treatment group and at least over 30 in your control group. Why? That's to get the statistics to work right. I'm getting into too much detail, I think. So single case timed examination, timed studies, single case timed studies is an experimental design. It's an efficacy study. The causal inference for one person or group, you can have a group be one whole group be a case. Like for instance, your training group, people who do training, they could say, do what I do as a trainer, is that a cause growth? You can do that kind of a study, efficacy study. As a therapist, you can do single case. You take your one client and you do this design, and you can say, especially if you do a series of these and track your outcomes, you can say, what I do is not just effective, but causes change. It is an evidence-based practice at that level. It might show that what you do is not effective or efficacious, so that's the risk of that. But anyway, this is what can be done. It's causal inference of one person or group against itself. So this is where the control is the person themselves or the group itself. So I showed this in a graph the last time we were together when we looked at a particular article that had the graphs. So you can chart the way the outcomes are going by what's called treatment concerns that the patient has. They identify the treatment concerns ahead of time, and then as you get into the therapy, they track where they're at with their treatment concerns over time, doing repeated measures of it. That's the method. That's the tactics of doing this particular strategy. Okay, single case timed experimental design. Was the therapy by the therapist A, the cause of change in client B? If you had a statistical significance, you could make that claim. Would it be warranted? It would be statistically warranted. Would it be warranted on the basis of the soundness of your strategy? Yes, it would. Because this particular design has been determined to be as valuable as this one, random controlled trials, because they're both efficacy studies. So what's the strategy? What is your concern? What is your purpose? What is your need? Which strategy or another kind of strategy would you choose? If you say to yourself, I wonder what happens if you put little boys in a room and compare that to what happens when you put little girls in a room. And you watch them and you make observations about what was happening. Or I wonder what would happen if in doing individual therapy with your client, you decide to do what I call a unilateral experiment. Usually in Gestalt, we think of an experiment as
sorry,
something.
can you say unilateral experiment? Can you say more about that? Because I'm not sure I translated right.
Yes,
Unilateral.
Right. There is negotiated between one person and another. Let's come to an agreement about what's going to happen. That is a negotiated experiment in terms of the therapy. Unilateral experiment is where the therapist says to themselves, I wonder what would happen if I did this, and then they do it. They don't negotiate that with the client. They just change the way they are present, change the way their presence manifests. That's a unilateral experiment. Presence is the first experiment. Just that you're going to show up as you are and be real, that's an experiment. What's going to happen when I do that? It's kind of scary when you do that. Don't know what's going to happen. But then you pay attention to what's happening and you make observations about it. Maybe out loud, maybe to yourself. Maybe you write down these things. So these are different strategies. Depends on your particular interests or questions. Whoops. Here's the last one down here. Meta-analysis. Meta-analysis is when you take a particular kind of study or outcome and you gather the outcomes of many different studies, and you say, now I want to check and see what are the results across cultures, across groups, training groups, therapists. I mean, it's like you're not just studying one research group, one person or something like that. You're looking across boundaries, like what happens when we compare the outcomes of people in Argentina, Brazil, Mexico, the United States, England, well, EAGT, Ukraine. You do a meta study. So what does the researcher do? They do a lot of looking in the literature to find the studies, and then they compare the outcomes of these different research projects to see what is the effectiveness, or what is the effect, or what is the efficacy, what is the result across therapists, regions, and cultures. What's the benefit of doing that? It's just like it's just like saying, stand back now and try and capture what's happening in the entire world. This is it. Well, you can't do that. You can't grasp what's happening in the entire world, but you can kind of approach it. That's what a meta study does, meta-analysis. Any questions on these particular designs? Which of the following designs do you think best supports your interests and purposes?
Я можу відгукнутись, так? Я в
So
українському
I
каналі.
can
Чи
I
чутно мене
can
зараз?
say
Да, окей. Я з великою цікавістю якраз
so
дотисну single
I'm
case і process
I'm
outcome.
looking with great
Тому
curiosity
що
with
мені
single case
якби не
and
дуже
a process
зрозуміло, але цікаво,
outcome
як дійсно
because it's not
правильно
quite
впроваджувати.
clear for me
Я сама
how
спеціалізуюся
to
на загальних
implement
філологічних
them.
дослідженнях, але в
So
мене проходять там для захисту дипломів статей з
I'm
зібраними методами.
working in
Ну,
the
що
area of
знайомі
psychological
бажають
research,
працювати з цим.
but people come to
Дійсно
me
цікаво,
with
як,
the already
ну, от, наприклад, для single case стадії, що
like this
необхідно,
design
як можливо
and
виміряти таку
outcomes.
суттєву зміну?
So
Чи
how can
непланово,
about the
чи
single case
якимось
study? How
специфічною
can you
метою? В
measure
цьому в мене є інтерес.
those
І для
changes?
process
Do you use
outcome також
specific
цікаво, як
quiz
дослідити,
or specific
як мовити,
test
що
and for process
треба
outcome?
зробити, що саме ця інтервенція вплинула, наприклад.
How can
Якщо
you
це технічна одна
check
треба в
if
інший
this
спосіб.
particular intervention
От, тому
had an
рада, якщо
impact?
якісь відповіді маєте,
So I'm
або,
glad
можливо,
if you have
можете
any
приклад
answers to
дослідження
that,
надіслати, щоб
or
можна
can
було
you
переглянути.
send any
І цих
examples
категорій
of
було б дуже
of
цікаво.
studies from this category for I could have a look?
So the single case time series, it's a series, it's single case, and it's timed. So you take measurements at times, repeated times over the length of the therapy, say. And so what do you take measures of? Before any of the therapy starts in what's called a baseline phase, you or your intake person, if it's not the therapist, it's better, but the intake person asks the patient, can you identify any particular things that really bother you or that you would like to change? And the person might say, I I I bite my nails. I'm so anxious. I just bite my nails completely down to the quick, and they bleed and they're sore, and they look horrible, and I'm ashamed of them. I would like to stop biting my nails. Okay. Anything else? Well, I'm anxious, so I feel really uptight. I feel tense. I feel almost sick to my stomach. And that's if I have to go outside of my house. So, I mean, I can't even go near the front door without feeling this way. Okay, and you would like what? I'd like to I'd like to feel that less or have that go away. Okay. So now let's say we go from 1 to 10 on biting the nails. Okay, so 1 is you're totally out of control. You're biting your nails. Well, they're bleeding, they're sore, they're infected. It's horrible. 10 is my nails are so long I need to clip them off. I'm not doing that anymore. Okay, so that's the range. And now what I want you to do is every day find a number between 1 and 10 where you're at with that. Every day as we go through the therapy. And then we meet every week. So I want you to tell me what the number is, what the numbers are for the week. Okay. Or the anxiety. How close could you get to the door? Well, I couldn't even think about going to the door before I get uptight. Okay, that's a 10. One is I went to the door and opened it up and went outside. No problem. Okay, that's a 1. All right, so every day, keep track of it. And when we meet again in a week, you tell me the numbers for each day. Okay, that's the tracking. Repeated measures. The client picks the particular behavior in question and then quantifies it, gives it a number between 1 and 10 or whatever you want to pick. So you can put those numbers on a chart and you can create a visual graph of where the patient is at. Okay, so the baseline phase is before the treatment starts. And you have the client rate how they're doing every day for the baseline phase, and you give it 2 or 3 weeks. So you have a measure of what the patient was like before treatment started. Then you have, as the treatment progresses, the client keeps measuring, and you have the measure of what it was like as the treatment continued. And so in the best of all worlds, as you see the treatment, the baseline phase is way up here, and as the treatment progresses, the numbers go down, right? You're getting somewhere. Whether it's biting the nails or can't go near the door, you got success. Now, what you do is and it's not going to just go straight down, right? Like falling off a cliff. It's going to be zigzag. But the overall effect, if it's effective or efficacious, then it's like going down. So what you do is you notice where there's a downtick or a point of success. And when you come back to the patient after several weeks, you go, what happened right there? And they'll tell you, oh, well, that's when my aunt Nora came to visit and she was in the house with me. So I didn't feel so afraid of going near the front door. And Nora hates me to bite my nails, so I didn't want to do that when she was here. Oh, okay. And every place where there was a downtick or success or something, you go, well, what about over here? Oh, well, that was this or that was that. So then you quantify, you not quantify, you use this is adding, yeah, we didn't talk about mixed methods. So this is a mixed methods strategy. You've got the chart, and now you do the interview after the study and find out what was happening at places where there was a good outcome. And you find out, and then you use your phenomenological ability to track qualitatively what was in the person's life at the time when they had success. Or in terms of your therapy, you could say, what were we do? What was effective on this day in therapy? You might want to do it sooner rather than later, ask that question, right? Well, so what happened right there? Oh, well, you really noticed me. It felt like you were really paying attention to me, or you remembered details that I told you 2 weeks ago, or whatever it was. So you keep track of the quality of the process, not just the quantity of the chart. The quantity of the chart tells you that there's something happened, significantly happened. What was it? The investigation after the fact tells you what that was. That's a process outcome study. Does that make sense? Any questions?
I have a question, and it's not directly actually related to the design, but certainly emerged when you were discussing that. As a Gestalt therapist and researcher, I really want to know your answer about what is research suggesting to that point regarding Gestalt therapy's outcome or effectiveness. Like, can we say it is evidence-based?
Great question. This relates to another subject, which is called advocacy. I was involved in a single case time series study that colleagues did, was originated in Argentina. No, Chile. Sorry. And it was positive outcomes. So we wrote that up, and it was published in a peer-reviewed journal. And so could we say that Gestalt therapy was shown to be efficacious for anxiety in one study? Now, in the United States, there are these committees. I forget the technical term, but they're considered to be best practices type of committees. They decide which therapies are considered an acceptable evidence-based approach, or a maybe likely kind of approach. Still it shows some efficacy, but not at the level of the first case. So these committees make these decisions. How do they make these decisions? They have determined that it takes, I think it was, I may have these numbers wrong, but for the sake of illustration, don't pay attention too much to the number. They say it takes one random controlled trial to show efficacy, while it takes maybe 5 single case time series studies to equal 1 random controlled trial. These numbers are wrong, they're relative. But the main idea here is that there is a committee somewhere that says this is what we regard to be evidence-based, an evidence-based therapy. It has 1 or 2 random controlled trials. It has a number of, quite a bit number of single case time series cases, number of different cases. And these SCT, single case time series studies, need to be independent from each other. So you can't have one therapist that produces 25 single case studies working with anxiety people and say, oh, yeah, Gestalt is an evidence-based approach. What you might be able to say is that therapist is effective and efficacious in what they do. What they do causes good outcomes. So it takes several single case time series studies to reach the level at which one of these committees would say, we recognize this particular approach as being evidence-based. Now here's another one for this particular disorder, anxiety, depression, bipolar, whatever. So the way they do it is they say, how many of these efficacy studies do you have, whether it's RCTs or single case, and were they independent, and what were they for? So they are looking at the design and the population. So then they could say they determined that Gestalt is an evidence-based approach. That's not enough. They would say Gestalt is an evidence-based approach for the treatment of anxiety. That's how it goes. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So if the Gestalt world was to be very strategic in the way that we do research, the single case time series design is much easier for an individual therapist to do. It just takes them. Then we would say, we would create a mechanism by which this training group that was decided they wanted to do research, and that one over there, and this one in Germany, and that one in Italy, and this one on and on. They would say, any of our people that want to conduct single case time series studies, here's the model, we'll train you in how to do it. Okay, then you conduct it, you keep track of it, you write it up. That's one. Now, if some other training group decides same thing, and they've got one or two people that are doing it, that's 2 and 3. So far you got 3 because they're separate, right? They're not part of the same group that put together the one project of 25 people doing single case time studies. That's, I think, worth something, but in terms of the people who are keeping track of what's and making the decision about what's considered evidence-based, they need to have independent researchers in different places doing these single case studies. And the advocacy is relates to another subject that we'll get to, which is writing up of research. These committees don't have any other means of making their decisions except looking at published studies. So they'll do literature reviews, and they will say, how many RCTs does this approach have? How many single case time studies does this approach have? How many effectiveness studies does it have? It just has effectiveness studies. Well, there's a correlation, but we can't say for sure that it causes the effect. So it's the efficacy studies that are really needed. These other strategies can provide answers for other kinds of curiosities and needs and purposes. But in terms of qualifying Gestalt as an evidence-based approach, what do we need? We need efficacy studies, either in group or single cases. We need them written up and published in peer-reviewed journals. We need people who are going to advocate with these particular committees or groups that are the ones that decide that it's efficacious, and so forth. You know, I just looked at the time. I'm supposed to be at work across town in 10 minutes. All right. Why do single case time series? It's manageable, it's causal, it's cumulative, naturalistic. I'm not a favor of that term anymore. It's affordable. Let's stop. What, for a minute. These are single case designs like I just mentioned. Where are you at with all of this stuff now? Where are you at this point? Yeah, this is one of the committees I was telling you about. It's a division of the American Psychological Association on clinical psychology or something. I forgot what it is, what their division is. But they're the ones that came up with some of these things. So this is a classic article, Chambliss and Holland, where they wrote about what it takes, 50 subjects per group, good statistical evaluation, or mini SCTS, single case studies. Naturalistic would be, in the single case time studies, it would be like looking at what Gestalt therapists actually do, however they work. It's an individual that practices whatever way they work. And it's a lot more affordable.
Bill,
Yeah.
hi. I want to thank you. I wish I had you for my first graduate class in research in 1962. And I'm very mindful of the meeting in Cape Cod in 2013, where I was honored for directing so many dissertations on Gestalt therapy.
Yeah, that was nice.
And the article that I was working on to prepare and present there has never been published, and I'm working on it. That was in 2013. And
well, hurry up.
Was
Get
about
it done.
Bob Burns' first dissertation, my fifth dissertation I directed. And it was about the validity of the terms that were used in Pearl's Hefferline and Goodman called resistance or defenses. And were these terms that were being used by Gestalt trainers really valid? Were they doing what it is that our teachers were telling us, what these resistances did for us, how they protected us, how they defended us, how they served us? And that was a source of his curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we spent time exploring about, very much along the very design that you're presenting today. I really appreciate what you've done for the whole worldwide field of Gestalt therapy, the research you've done, so forth. I'm pleased to have you in the textbook that Sarah and I created for Gestalt therapies, 2005. Good to see you, Phil.
Good to see you, Ansel. Good to hear you. Anybody else? I'm going to have to leave pretty soon. Thank you, Julia. So let me
Я
say,
хочу сказати декілька слів ще.
yeah.
So I need to say a couple of words.
Okay.
Дуже дякую, Філіп, за таку цікаву лекцію і
Thank you
за
very much for such an interesting lecture,
такий показ, які бувають види
such a
досліджень, як
vital
ми їх можемо
demonstration,
використовувати.
which research designs are available, how we can use them. So it helped me to settle it in my head, how it really works.
І також в чаті багато
And also there are many gratitudes to you, like acknowledgements in chat. I want to say that we invite you to everybody who is interested in Gestalt therapy research to join our Gestalt Research Association. If you are a researcher now and if you are curious about this area, please join us. We have much what we do in this field, and also our next lecture
яку буде робити Філіп,
that Philip will do.
Її точну назву, вона буде
So let me
про
see its precise
валідність та лікувальні
name. It will be about validity,
теж
significancy,
я
and
запрошую, вона буде 10 травня, через місяць.
efficiency.
раз
It
дякую
will
тобі,
be
Філіп, за
on May
цікаві
9th.
матеріали.
Thank you very much, Phil, for the interesting materials you present.
Thank you, Alexia. I really like meeting with people in Ukraine. For some reason, it's like you guys really matter to me and Linda. And by the way, can you turn your head to the side? Yeah, keep turning. Turn your head to the side. Ah, I didn't notice the color at first. Yeah, that's
Hey.
okay. All right.
I have one question. Would you
Okay.
like me to develop a continuing ed certificate for this presentation for IAGT? Would that help you, Elisa? I mean, so it's 2 hours continuing ed, continuing professional
Yeah,
education.
it's possible.
Okay. I'll work on that and send it to you.
Great.
Дуже дякую за пропозицію. Це було би чудово.
Great.
Тоді усі
So
учасники,
thank you
які
very much
хочуть
for your
мати
suggestion.
сертифікат
That would be
селекції,
great.
будь
So
ласка,
all
надішліть
the participants who
email,
will want to have
і ми вам визволимо тоді цей
their
сертифікат.
certificates for this
Дякую,
lecture,
Анса, за цю
please
чудову пропозицію.
send us your emails. Thank you, Ansel, very much for such a great
Я
offer.
хвилююсь, щоб Філ встиг
I
на свою
worry for
наступну
Phil
зустріч.
could
Тому на
have
цьому
enough
пропоную
time to get
завершувати.
to his next meeting. So let's finish now.
Thank you.
All right,
Thank you,
everyone.
Alexi. Thank you, Philip, and everyone. I appreciate very much your effort to highlight the necessity to do research to validate Gestalt, because I think one of the reason that CBT is more used is because CBT is more. There are more research in CBT. In Gestalt, there are less research, so it is important to pay attention to make effort to the research of Gestalt. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Добре. Наташа, зупиняємо запис.
So we stop the recording.